When a quiet landowner parks his truck outside his home, a power-hungry HOA declares war, with fake fines, phony lawyers, and even a private hit squad. But they picked the wrong target. What starts as a petty dispute explodes into a full-blown legal battle that shakes the entire community. I bought my slice of peace a few years ago, a small half-acre plot just outside the neat lines and flower beds of Hillside Grove. One of those suburban developments where every mailbox matches and stepping on your lawn wrong might summon a tribunal. My lot wasn't in the HOA's boundary, that was the whole point. No association, no neighbors poking around, no smug newsletters telling me what shade of beige my house should be. I'm a mechanic, own my own mobile repair service. I sleep odd hours, work on call, and park my truck wherever it's convenient, usually in front of my house during the day, engines still ticking after a long night pulling alternators off deadbeat sedans. My driveway's a little tight, and honestly, I don't see the point of pulling into the garage if I'm heading back out in a few hours. It's not like the road is busy. I'm tucked down a side street, not blocking anything. The house next to mine is separated by a fence, and the only foot traffic I get are squirrels with a death wish. One afternoon, after a particularly nasty brake job that left my hands looking like I'd boxed a coal miner, I spotted a white envelope in my mailbox. Not unusual, except it had this pretentious gold-embossed seal and Hillside Grove Community Enrichment Board typed on the front like it was the freaking White House. I opened it expecting maybe a community event invite or a warning about local coyotes. Inside was a letter that started with "Dear Resident," which already made me raise an eyebrow. It claimed I was in violation of Section 4, Paragraph B of their bylaws. Something about unauthorized on-street parking creating a visual nuisance and lowering the aesthetic standard of the neighborhood. The kicker? They were fining me $50. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it into the oil pan. A fine? From an HOA I don't belong to? That's like being grounded by someone else's mom. I tossed the letter in the junk pile next to expired coupons and forgot about it. But they didn't. A week later, I got another one. This time it was $75 and it had the words "Second Notice" in big red font. 2 days after that, a third letter arrived. $125 now, citing continued visual disruption and non-compliance. I stared at that one a little longer. Then a fourth came in. And a fifth. By the end of the month, they claimed I owed them $300 in accumulated fines for parking a car on my own damn street. Now, I don't consider myself a petty man, but there's something about unsolicited authority that rubs me wrong, especially when it starts costing me money, and more so when it's coming from a bunch of wannabe aristocrats whose power ends at their trimmed hedges. So I walked down to the Hillside Grove HOA office one Thursday morning, still in my coveralls, grease stains and all. I figured the visual disruption of my attire might give them heart palpitations. The place was exactly what I imagined. Faux colonial building, flag waving proudly out front, a small lobby with the faint smell of lemon cleaner and judgment. At the desk sat a woman in her 50s, hair stiff enough to block radar, glasses perched halfway down her nose. Her nameplate read Karen Barlow, chairwoman. Of course. She looked up at me like I'd just tracked manure across her marble floor. "Can I help you?" she asked, already disapproving. "Yeah? I've been getting some mail from you folks. Something about fines. Thought I'd come straighten that out." She tilted her head, smile tight. "Address?" I gave it. Her fingers clacked across the keyboard. "Ah, yes. You're the property on Sycamore Lane. We've had several complaints about your vehicle. It's parked on the road for extended periods, which violates our visual standard codes." I nodded slowly. "Right. Small issue with that. I'm not in your HOA, my parcel's outside your development. Karen's smile didn't waver, but it soured somehow. You're adjacent, which means your property impacts the visible harmony of the neighborhood. That grants us regulatory concern. Regulatory concern, I repeated. So you're saying because you can see my truck, you get to fine me? It's a matter of community consistency. Hillside Grove maintains certain expectations for the image we present. Residents, even adjacent ones, are encouraged to cooperate. Encouraged? Lady, you're sending me bills. I didn't agree to any of your rules. I didn't sign anything. You don't have jurisdiction over a pothole on my side of the line. She shrugged, hands folding primly. Our position is clear. Continued non-compliance may result in escalated action. I stared at her a moment, not angry, just baffled. You know this is harassment, right? She smiled wider. We prefer to think of it as enforcement. I left without another word, gripping the crumpled letter in my pocket like a talisman. I didn't know what they'd try next, but one thing was certain. This was far from over. A few days passed after my little face-off with Karen Barlow, and I figured maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. Maybe I'd scared them off with my presence, or maybe they were waiting for me to cave and write a check for $300 like some guilty schoolboy. But no, these people didn't do let it go. They did escalation. It started with the stickers. I walked out one morning to grab a wrench from the back of my truck and noticed a bright orange tag slapped on the driver's side window. Notice of violation, it read in bold capital letters, followed by some HOA-sounding mumbo-jumbo and a warning of imminent towing. I peeled it off, thinking it might have been left over from the previous day's mail run, and tossed it. The next morning, a second one was there. Same color, same nonsense. This time it was glued, not taped, not slipped under the wiper. Glued. Industrial strength. Took me 15 minutes and half a bottle of citrus solvent to scrub the residue off. That night I installed a motion sensor light and angled one of my exterior cameras toward the street. Sure enough, just past 2 in the morning, the camera pinged. I pulled up the feed on my phone and watched, bleary-eyed, as a man in a reflective vest crept up my driveway like he was on a recon mission. He looked both ways, then reached into his coat and pulled out a fresh sticker, slapping it onto my rear bumper like he was tagging wild game. I rewound the footage and caught a glimpse of the logo on his vest. Hillside Grove HOA. These people were certifiably out of their minds. I sent the footage to my email, then wrote a formal cease and desist letter and dropped it off at the HOA office that morning. I didn't bother going inside, just taped it to their glass door and walked off. Short and sweet. This is a legal notice that further harassment will be met with formal legal action. My property is not under your jurisdiction. Your attempts at enforcement are unlawful. You have been warned. 2 days of silence. Then came the letter from the HOA legal department. The envelope was thicker than usual, like someone had printed it using a thesaurus and a heavy hand. Inside was a multi-page document printed on faux legal letterhead with all the trimmings. Latin phrases, bolded statutes, threats of liens and civil litigation. The signature at the bottom was dramatic. Michael Stenz, Eskerner, HOA General Counsel. Now I've seen enough courtroom drama to know when someone's bluffing. And this whole thing reeked of dollar store intimidation. First clue? They spelled jurisdiction wrong on page 2. Second clue? I Googled the guy. No website, no firm, no bar number, just a LinkedIn profile with a grainy photo and a description that said, Independent HOA Enforcement Consultant. I'm not a lawyer, but even I know that's not a real title. I tried calling the number listed on the letter. No answer, straight to voicemail. His outgoing message was just a monotone guy saying, "You've reached Michael. Leave it." Not even Sten's law office or any of that proper lawyer jazz. Just Michael. I printed everything, including screenshots of the LinkedIn page and a side-by-side of real legal documents versus the HOA's cosplay version, and stuffed it in a folder labeled Evidence. That same night, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street from my house. Windows tinted so dark they looked painted. It just sat there, engine idling. No movement. Around midnight, it drove off. The next day, it was back. I started leaving my porch light on all night, moved the camera to catch the street. I counted 3 nights in a row with that SUV parked just within sight of my front yard, like they were watching for something. Whether it was HOA surveillance or just a nosy neighbor with too much time, I didn't care. It was getting creepy. Then my elderly neighbor, Miss Nancy, stopped by while I was checking my mail. "You might want to watch your back," she said casually, like she was warning me about raccoons in the trash. "Excuse me?" "I was at the HOA meeting last night. Karen told everyone you were a problem property owner and that action might need to be taken if you continue to disrespect community guidelines." "Guidelines?" I snorted. "I don't even live in the damn community." Nancy gave me a sympathetic look. "I know. But Karen's saying your property affects home values, that it falls under the visual integrity clause, whatever that means." I thanked her, went inside, and sat down with a beer and my growing stack of documentation. Between the stickers, the late-night creeper patrols, the fake lawyer, and now this ridiculous idea that my truck's mere visibility constituted a community crisis, it was clear I was being set up for something bigger. The letters had started as petty. Now they were getting strategic. And I wasn't going to let it slide. It wasn't just about the damn truck anymore. It was the principle, the surveillance, the fake legal threats, the neighbor committee treating me like some contaminant on their perfectly trimmed map. I knew what this was. A soft siege, HOA style. And if they thought I'd roll over for a few letters and a doughy guy in a vest sneaking around at night, they were about to learn something new. I made a call to Maria Kemble. She came highly recommended by a guy I did brake work for last summer, a land use attorney with a real reputation for handing HOA boards their own bylaws in court. We met at her office, a tidy place with mismatched furniture and more coffee than air. I handed over the stack of letters, photos, sticker residue, and the golden gem, the correspondence from the so-called Michael Sten's escort. Maria flipped through everything in silence, just nodding every now and then. When she hit the fake legal letter, her eyebrow rose so high I thought it might detach. "You say this guy represents the HOA?" she asked. "That's what they claim." She opened her laptop, tapped for a few seconds, then turned the screen toward me. "This is the State Bar's official licensing database. Let's look up Michael Sten's." We searched. Nothing. No active license, no inactive license, no suspension, no mention of the guy at all. Maria narrowed her eyes, leaned back in her chair, and grinned like a shark spotting a wounded fish. "So not only is your property outside their jurisdiction, but they're using a fake lawyer to threaten you. That's fun. We'll start with a cease and desist, followed by a claim for harassment, unlawful intimidation, and emotional distress." She wasn't kidding. That afternoon, Maria drafted a formal demand letter on her firm's letterhead, the real kind with actual credentials and no typos. She outlined in painful detail that Hillside Grove HOA had no legal authority over my parcel, that their continued correspondence and surveillance constituted harassment, and that their legal representative appeared to be practicing without a license. She also referenced California Penal Code Section 6126, impersonating an attorney. Misdemeanor, fines, jail time, that sort of music. We sent it certified mail and emailed a copy directly to the HOA inbox. Maria copied the county registrar, the planning commission, and just for flavor, The local news station's tips email. The silence that followed was golden. No letters, no stickers, no SUV. For 3 days. Then on Monday morning, Maria called. Suit's been filed, civil court. I listed them for harassment, private nuisance, and unauthorized attempts at regulation. We're asking for $25,000 in damages and a restraining order. I've requested an emergency hearing. Let's make them dance. The hearing was set for the following Friday. I showed up in a clean button-down and jeans, the best I could do without betraying my soul, and brought the full evidence binder. Maria showed up in a dark gray suit and the energy of someone who knew exactly how this was going to end. Karen Barlow was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table like it was her personal spa day. She had a guy with her in a navy suit and cheap leather shoes. No bar number on his folder, no briefcase. Just a printed packet and that same fake name tag, Michael Stenz, S.K. Maria leaned toward me and whispered, "Let's have some fun." The judge, a stern woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses shaped like arrows, opened with a few formalities. Then Maria stood and calmly presented the case. My land was not within Hillside Grove's jurisdiction. HOA had no authority over it, and yet they had sent threatening correspondence, attempted to regulate property use, surveilled the premises, and, most notably, employed an individual who was not, and had never been, a licensed attorney in the state of California. She then pulled up the bar registry on the court's display monitor and ran the search for Michael Stenz. Nothing. Judge, Ms. Barlow, can you confirm this man's identity? Karen cleared her throat, but Michael jumped in. Your Honor, I represent the community's legal interest. Are you licensed to practice law in California? He paused. A long, awkward pause. I have experience with community enforcement. Sir, that's not what I asked. Maria handed the judge a printed copy of California's licensing code. Under Section 6126, presenting oneself as a legal professional without a license is a misdemeanor offense. The defense moves to strike all statements from Mr. Stenz and requests that the HOA cease all legal contact unless represented by actual counsel. Karen's face went pale. Stenz, if that was his real name, sat down and suddenly found his shoelaces extremely interesting. The judge issued a preliminary ruling right there. Restraining order granted. HOA forbidden from further contact, surveillance, enforcement attempts, or physical approach within 100 feet of my property. A formal damages hearing was scheduled for the following month. We walked out of that courtroom like victors returning from battle. No parades, just satisfaction. Maria turned to me as we stepped into the sun. You know this isn't over, right? Oh, I'm counting on it, I said. They've barely started digging their own grave. It had been quiet for a week, almost suspiciously quiet. No more stickers, no creepy SUV parked outside, no mail from the HOA or their pretend attorney. After the court slapped them with that restraining order, I figured they'd finally accepted reality and slithered back into their white picket comfort zone. But I underestimated Karen Barlow's talent for stupidity wrapped in entitlement. It happened on a Tuesday morning around 10. I just finished changing oil on a neighbor's truck and stepped out front to let the engine run. That's when I saw them. 3 men standing on the sidewalk in front of my property like they were the goddamn A-Team. If the A-Team shopped exclusively at Army surplus discount bins and got dressed in the dark, they wore matching T-shirts that said HOA Enforcement in bold stencil font, ironed on, crooked. One of them was built like a vending machine, arms too short for his torso. The second was wiry with a clipboard and mirrored aviators that made him look like a third-string mall cop. The third guy had one of those Bluetooth headsets from the early 2000s and kept adjusting it like he was on a call with the Pentagon. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there with my coffee waiting to see which brand of crazy they were selling today. The clipboard guy stepped forward. "You are Richard Howard?" I took a long sip. "Who's asking?" "We're with the Hillside Grove HOA Enforcement Division. We're here to collect on an outstanding balance of $300. I blinked. "You're serious?" "It is our duty to ensure compliance and resolve unpaid violations. As of this morning, your balance remains unresolved." I looked around like maybe I'd wandered onto the set of a hidden camera show. "You realize there's a restraining order against the HOA. You're in violation of a court order just standing here." Vending machine folded his arms. "We're not HOA. We're contracted security." Clipboard added, "This is a private collection visit. We're allowed to approach the property." "Are you?" I asked, stepping down my porch. "And what exactly do you think is going to happen here?" Bluetooth guy moved toward my truck, pulled out his phone and began taking pictures of the tires, the VIN, even the hood ornament, which was currently missing because I hadn't gotten around to replacing it. "You might want to step back from my vehicle," I said. He kept snapping away. "We are assessing value in case a lien is issued." I laughed. "A lien? Over a fake fine from an HOA I don't belong to?" Vending machine started circling toward the driver's side door. "We'll be placing an immobilizer on the vehicle until the balance is paid." "Oh, I'd love to see you try." He knelt down and pulled what looked like a plastic boot out of his duffel. It was bright yellow and covered in scratches, and definitely meant for a sedan, not a lifted pickup with 33-inch tires. As he fumbled with it, I casually reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and started recording. "This is Richard Howard," I said to the camera. "These 3 men are currently trespassing on my private property in violation of a court order. They are attempting to tamper with my vehicle without a warrant or legal authority, and they are dumb enough to be filming themselves while doing it." Bluetooth guy straightened up. "Sir, you are interfering with a private enforcement action." I pointed the phone at him. "You are interfering with my patients." Then vending machine tried to wedge the boot onto the front tire. The second he leaned in, the tire shifted, and the boot popped off and hit him in the knee. He yelped, stumbled backward, and landed flat on his ass in my flower bed, crushing 2 azaleas and a garden gnome named Steve. Clipboard guy stepped forward like he was about to escalate, tripped on the garden hose, and slammed into my trash bin, sending it flying across the driveway in a glorious arc. Lid popped off. Banana peels and old oil rags went airborne like confetti at a loser's parade. Bluetooth tried to help him up but tripped over Clipboard's ankle and slammed into the side of my truck face first, bouncing off with a grunt and dropping his phone, which immediately slid under the vehicle. I was dying. I genuinely had to pause the video recording because I was laughing so hard I couldn't hold the phone steady. The whole scene looked like an outtake from a bad sketch comedy show. I regained my breath long enough to call the police. 3 trespassers, fake enforcement, possibly impersonating officers, I said. "Oh, and they're bleeding all over my begonias." The dispatcher said an officer was on the way. 5 minutes later, a black and white cruiser pulled up. Stepping out was Officer Blackwell, a guy I'd seen a few times around town, usually giving speeding tickets to teenagers. He took one look at the mess, then at me, then back at the trio of groaning, dusty HOA commandos on my driveway. "Jesus," he muttered. "What the hell happened here?" "These gentlemen attempted to place a boot on my truck to collect a $300 fine from an HOA I'm not part of," I said, showing him the restraining order. "I believe that qualifies as trespassing, intimidation, and general idiocy." Blackwell talked to the 3 men, took their names and checked IDs. Turns out not one of them had a security license. No permit, no company registration. Just matching shirts and a shared delusion. Karen showed up midway through the investigation. Of course she did, stomping across the lawn in heels like she was leading a press conference. I demand you release them immediately, she snapped. They are authorized field agents. Blackwell gave her a look so dry it could start a brush fire. Ma'am, they're not authorized to collect anything. You sent them to violate a court order. That's obstruction and contempt. You may want to stop talking. Karen sputtered but didn't say another word. She just stood there, arms crossed, mouth twitching, while Blackwell cuffed clipboard and Bluetooth for trespassing and impersonating security personnel. Vending machine got to sit on the curb, holding an ice pack to his leg, cursing under his breath about Sioux-happy rednecks. As they were loaded into the back of the cruiser, I looked at Karen. You sent clowns to do a hitman's job, I said. Next time, maybe try sending someone with a brain. She didn't answer, just turned and walked off, heels crunching across broken flower pots and ego. I turned to Blackwell, who was finishing up the report. Gonna need this for court? He nodded. Oh yeah, and probably for YouTube. You filming? I hit stop on my phone. Got the whole damn thing. The fallout from the HOA's idiotic raid was even better than I'd hoped. The video I'd taken, which I posted to a private Facebook group for local homeowners, was shared over 200 times in a single night. People were calling them the Three Stooges of suburbia. Someone added clown music and uploaded it to TikTok. I didn't even know I had a TikTok. But beyond the memes and humiliation, something deeper was starting to unravel. Maria called me 2 days later, voice low and deadly calm. I think we found something. She sounded like she had just discovered the missing piece of a puzzle, and it wasn't a small one. You remember how Karen and her board kept insisting your property was technically visually connected to the HOA zone? I snorted. Yeah, because I'm a blight on their aesthetic utopia. Well, we pulled the public plats, the official parcel maps from the county GIS system, and your property is cleanly outside their jurisdiction, like absolutely no overlap. But when I checked the HOA's submitted documents, for their last expansion petition, there's a second map, a different one. That made me sit up straight. How different? Different enough that your parcel is drawn with an artificial easement overlay connecting it to the internal road system of Hillside Grove. It's subtle, but it makes your land look like it's part of their service area. And that's not real. No, she said. It's not real at all. And it's unfiled with the county records as part of their jurisdictional claim. That's falsification of official documents. That's criminal. There was a beat of silence on the line while we both let that sink in. Jesus, I muttered. Karen didn't just play dirty, she rewrote the map. Maria sent the docs over. 2 PDFs side by side. One was the real GIS map from the county's own site, showing my lot as an independent parcel with a clear property line and no HOA inclusion. The second was from a scanned document titled Revised HOA Growth Corridor 2021, which showed a faint hashed line connecting my land to theirs, essentially pulling me into the web. I'd dealt with grease-stained liars in my business, but this was fraud with a fake smile and a homeowner's newsletter. Maria took it straight to the county recorder's office, who confirmed there had been discrepancies raised previously but not pursued. Apparently, a junior employee flagged it over a year ago, but the issue got buried. No formal complaint, no investigation. That changed quickly. Within 48 hours, the district attorney's office then launched a review. Maria submitted a complaint backed by documentation, sworn statements, and copies of the restraining order. It wasn't just civil anymore. This was a felony-level falsification of public property records, with possible conspiracy charges, and Karen, she had no idea, not until the investigators showed up at the HOA clubhouse with clipboards, subpoenas, and deadpan expressions. I wasn't there, but I heard from Miss Nancy, who was practically vibrating with gossip, that Karen went ghost white demanded everyone remain calm, and tried to block them from accessing the file cabinet. One of the officers had to threaten her with obstruction before she stepped aside. The news broke in the local paper the next morning. HOA investigated for boundary fraud, chairwoman under scrutiny. It was the first time I'd seen her face on something she hadn't printed herself. Not a flattering photo either. She looked like someone had just told her the HOA bake sale was canceled. At this point, the other board members started abandoning ship. 2 of them resigned within a day. One released a public statement claiming he'd been misled about the accuracy of jurisdictional documents and was deeply concerned about the direction the HOA had taken. Translation: I'm not going to jail for Karen. Maria and I met again that Friday, and she dropped another bomb. The plat documents were updated by a guy named Eric Lozano, she said. Used to work in the GIS department. Quit last year. Guess who vouched for him? I already knew. Karen. Turns out she'd written a professional character reference for him during his employment, and according to one source, she'd offered him a donation to help her correct an oversight on the map overlays. It wasn't bribery in so many words, but it was close enough that the DA now had 2 open cases. One against the HOA as a corporate entity and one against Karen personally. I didn't even have time to celebrate because reporters started showing up at my door. Local news, then regional. They all wanted the same thing, the guy who stood up to the HOA and discovered the fraud. One guy even asked if I was running for office. I told him I was still deciding what to do with the garden gnome that got flattened during the raid. That was about as political as I got. But inside, I felt it. The tide had turned. It wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had tried to redraw reality, and now the whole damn community was watching as it crashed down around her ears. By the time the court date rolled around, the HOA wasn't just unraveling. It was combusting. Karen had gone radio silent. No more angry emails, no more self-righteous rants in the neighborhood Facebook group. The clubhouse stayed closed. The community newsletter didn't come out that month. No updates about the Spring Tulip Initiative or who won Yard of the Week. Just silence. Beautiful, glorious silence, but behind that silence was chaos. The district attorney had opened a formal investigation. 2 former HOA board members had flipped and agreed to cooperate. Eric Lozano, the GIS tech who doctored the boundary overlays, was subpoenaed and had reportedly entered a plea deal. And Karen? She was summoned to appear in court as the head of a now thoroughly disgraced HOA, which no longer had functioning leadership, a legal representative, or, frankly, any dignity left. The hearing wasn't some made-for-TV drama. It was better, cold, clean, and methodical. The judge from the earlier restraining order case had been upgraded to a more senior civil court, and she clearly remembered the file. As soon as Maria and I walked in, I saw the recognition in her eyes. Karen sat 2 tables away, flanked by a nervous-looking temp lawyer, probably hired last minute when the HOA's original counsel jumped ship. She looked 10 years older than she had at our first meeting. The hairspray helmet was sagging. No power suit today, just a navy jacket and the expression of someone bracing for a very large, very public slap in the face. Maria was calm, collected, a machine with a soul and a vengeance. She presented everything. The fake legal letters, the trespassing incident with the boot clowns, the restraining order violation, and finally the bombshell. Falsification of public records with intent to deceive both the county and me. She laid it all out like a surgeon on a clean table. Then came the witnesses. One of the former board members, now sheepish and red-faced, testified that Karen had pushed the boundary initiative and assured us everything was approved. He looked like he was trying to dissolve into the witness stand. Another HOA resident gave a statement about the intimidation tactics. how they'd been told not to interact with me, that I was hostile, non-compliant, and probably anti-community, whatever the hell that meant. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Maria submitted documentation showing that the HOA had diverted on over $35,000 in hours of community funds in the last fiscal year to enforcement operations, a category that, it turned out, included private security contractors, legal threats, and then reimbursement for Karen's community representation travel expenses, which included a weekend in Napa and a $480 dinner with a prospective compliance consultant. Spoiler alert, the consultant was her niece. The dinner was sushi. At that point, the judge looked up and said flatly, "I believe we've seen enough." The ruling was swift and absolute. Karen Barlow was barred from holding any administrative or elected position in any HOA for a period of 10 years. The HOA as a legal entity was found liable for harassment, trespass, and unlawful enforcement, and was ordered to pay a total of $162,000 in damages, fines, and legal costs. I received $72,000 in damages plus full reimbursement for attorney fees. A court-appointed receiver was assigned to dismantle and restructure the HOA board. All enforcement activities were suspended indefinitely until new leadership could be vetted and elected under court supervision. And Michael Stenz, an arrest warrant had already been issued. Turns out he wasn't just a fake lawyer. He had a history of impersonating legal counsel in 2 other counties. When I asked Maria how that guy even got into the picture, she shrugged. Karen probably found him on Craigslist. After the ruling, Karen stood and tried to make one final statement. The judge cut her off cold. "You have repeatedly misrepresented your authority, falsified documents, and endangered both the public trust and private property. Sit down." Karen sat down. She didn't say another word. We walked out of that courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. Maria high-fived me in the parking lot like we'd just won the Super Bowl. "You know," she said, "most people just pay the fine and roll over. I'm not most people." "No," she said, smiling. "You're the HOA's worst nightmare, a guy who reads the fine print." I drove home with the windows down and the radio up, for once enjoying the silence from across the fence. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't over. Not until that last final line was drawn. And I had just the idea for how to draw it. A month after the court ruling, things finally started feeling normal again. Well, my kind of normal. The truck was still parked exactly where it always had been, front tire resting proudly on my own damn dirt. No stickers, no threats, no HOA patrols, just peace, the sound of tools clinking in the garage, and the occasional bird dumb enough to think my side mirror was a mate. Karen's house went up for sale 2 weeks after the verdict. No goodbye, no last swipe of the iron fist, just a quiet for sale sign and a real estate agent who looked like he had no idea what kind of nuclear crater he'd been assigned to clean up. I heard through the grapevine she'd moved out of state, maybe to Arizona, probably trying to join another HOA under an alias. May God have mercy on their bylaws. As for Hillside Grove, the new court-appointed leadership actually seemed decent. They sent out a letter, one that didn't accuse me of visual pollution, formally apologizing for past misconduct, and inviting me to attend a community rebuilding event with burgers and a bounce house. I politely declined. Instead, I hosted my own gathering. I called it the annual HOA Freedom Cookout. I set up a smoker in the driveway, brought out folding chairs, hung a hand-painted sign that read, "No rules, no fees, no Karen." Neighbors came from all over. Even folks I'd never met brought six-packs and lawn chairs. Miss Nancy baked a pie that somehow contained 3 different kinds of liquor. My buddy Joe brought a fire pit made out of a repurposed washing machine drum, and someone gifted me a tiny, ridiculous gnome with boxing gloves and sunglasses. We named him Steve Jr. We had music, beer, ribs, and stories. Lots of them. About HOA horror tales, property line feuds, and one guy who once fought a citation over the color of his mailbox and won using federal paint code regulations. Heroes walk among us. At sunset, I pulled out the final surprise, a brand new mailbox I'd custom welded in my garage. It was made from solid steel, painted chrome, and shaped like a bald eagle drop-kicking a clipboard. Mounted right on the curb facing Hillside Grove. Maria showed up just in time to see me bolted in place. She handed me a beer and raised her eyebrow. Subtle. Thanks. I was going for constitutionally aggressive. We toasted. The music kept playing. Steve Jr. stood guard by the grill like a tiny suburban sentinel. And as the stars came out, I looked at the truck, the lawn, the people, the lights. No fines, no fear. No HOA goons measuring grass height with a ruler. Just life, lived loud, free, and on my own terms. Exactly the way it should be.